Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dublin Tech Talks, the new normal podcast in association with Icon Accounting. Today we have Jamie Heaslip joining the show. Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, you see, as I'm flying in here in my Top Gun background, I like to change them up every so often just to keep people guessing.
We don't want to see what's behind it. I say that's the most important thing. Everybody gets to see my bedroom office every episode. So, you've been involved in lots since finishing up your professional career. You were with Google, you were with Kitman, you've lots of different jobs. You're with Flender at the moment and different organizations. Do you want to give an update on what you're doing and where you are?
Yeah, I suppose the best way to describe it is I'm kind of like a consultant, I suppose, for want of a better word. I invested in a couple of different businesses while playing, and I decided, post finishing up and after my time in Google, that I wanted to start spending a bit more time with the different businesses that I'm involved in, to learn more about that industry and the business and more about that, kind of startup world of how businesses grow and scale. More being in it than kind of surveying from the top. And when you're surveying from the top in that kind of boardroom environment, that you're kind of passing over more, I suppose, working, how to work as a team and that dynamic and kind of the leadership perspective and at a different point of view. But in the weed, when you get into the weeds and into a company more, you're obviously learning more actual hands-on type stuff. So, since the start of the year, I spent a lot of time with Flender. Previous to that, obviously worked in Google for 13 months full time, and I'm prior to that, heavily involved in Kitman Labs and the pubs and UrbanVolt, and there's a couple of other ones in there as well. So I'm just kind of now obviously a lot more time in my hands, looking at different things, and kind of exploring the world more of how to kind of upskill myself on that mentoring kind of coaching perspective.
Well, and just with Flender, as we'll go through a couple of them. Flender is peer-to-peer lending. A lot of people might know what that is.
That's good. It's a fair point. Yeah,
and I think it's going to become more prevalent with availability of funding over the next kind of 6 months, where businesses, the traditional route might be available due to kind of risk adverse businesses.
Lending in general has, I should take a step back. Banking in general has been transformed over the last 12 years, since the last financial kind of crash, and it's been transformed since then. And you've seen a lot of different tech providers, startups come into the space and almost kind of break it up, you know what I mean? Because the way banks have been set up over the years, things have kind of been tacked on. There's layers of hierarchy in there and compliance and stuff. And so a lot of different agile providers have come into the space. Just even recently, you just look at Revolut, for example, which is kind of front and center, I suppose, in that world. And they're doing exactly that. They're kind of coming in, they're coming up with what does the consumer want? How can we deliver to them? They don't have the legacy issues of a big kind of company. They're able to build into it almost and stay agile and efficient in that regard. And you can see they're actually scaling pretty aggressively right now in Dublin in their European headquarters. So that whole fintech space has been kind of opened up over the last few years, and lending is one of them, particularly SME lending. And because for a bank, it's the same, for a bank to do 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million loan is the same type of servicing as it is for, 20, 50, 100, 300 grand loans, except without the same return. So, a gap was identified. If anything, Ireland's actually behind the trend a little bit in terms of non-pillar bank lending. In the US, up to 75% of SME loans are done through non-pillar bank providers. Continental Europe's about 50%. Ireland, the central banks say it's around 10%. There's a huge gap between where other markets are and where Ireland is, and you could say that's an opportunity. But what I think it is, if I'm honest, is it shows that pillar banks probably have a bit of monopoly in our market, and what we're trying to do is educate people and show them of the alternatives. It's not for everyone, but in terms of giving time back to SMEs, I think we can do that. You know, you can take, you know, in Q4 last year, for example, I think it was IBEC or it was ISME came out with a study showing it took 6 to 8 weeks on average to get an answer on a loan application. On average, 2 weeks to draw down. So you're looking at anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks from start of application to getting it, and that's if they say yes.
Yeah.
You know, we cut that time right down, literally days. You know what I mean? And that's a huge saving of time and resources for people in an SME world, which is a whole lot more dynamic at times than big business. And so, sorry, going back, taking a step back. Yeah, that's why I initially got involved in the space. And then you see, you know, in terms of the retail lending aspect of it, of where you and I can essentially put money in our account, and then different loans and different businesses go in the marketplace with looking for a loan. You know, you're seeing, it's really interesting. You're seeing right now as well, you're seeing a lot of people come to the platform, sign up and loan money to Irish companies, who still go through all the same credit checks that we applied before, but they actually get a return on their money of, you know, 8, 9, 10, 11%, depending on the type of loan. And I think it's a win-win for everyone. You know what I mean? Like, companies that qualify and need the money are getting it, but also the person giving it has all the different credit checks put in place. There's obviously risk. There's risk in everywhere. But they're also getting a return as well. So, you know, there's a good kind of win-win kind of narrative there.
Well, yeah, I was having a look through the website. What I actually liked about it was the frictionless kind of process of logging in, having a look around. There wasn't too over the top from it, and it seems to, you know, an easy way to get money involved and get investment. And it seemed that all the businesses there were, you know, fully funded. So it seems to be a good take up in what people are looking at.
Yeah, and obviously, like, you know, like a lot of businesses, you know, as COVID hit, we had to change and adapt in terms of businesses that we can lend to and what we're looking at on our different credit checks and all that sort of thing. But in essence, the actual process itself is really, really seamless, especially if you sign up for auto lending, which a lot of our lenders do. You know, they sign up, they set the parameters in terms of risk profile, amount they want to lend, and the time of the loan. So the loan can be 6 months, 36 months, and they set it up, and they might set it up for like 250 quid automatically loan. So once it hits parameters, boom, it goes in. So it's literally like put your money in the account, you know, and you don't have to think about it a whole lot, and it's kind of working away for you in the background. Which is great when you look at the average return they're getting is about 9-10%, with a default rate of 1.1%, which is a pretty good kind of.
Yeah, well, if you're getting 1%, it's barely at savings at the moment. It's not a bad return. Yeah.
Look, there's risk in everything as well. I always have to say that, but and it might not be for everyone, but like it's yeah, I think it's a pretty good if you have the ability to do so. I think it's not a bad way to invest your money over the next, you know, our average loan size is about 32 months, or term is about 32 months, but there is 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. So it's not a bad place, all things considered.
So you mentioned risks there, so nice segue into everything else. You've been quite active in your portfolio since, you know, you were saying during your playing days and afterwards.
Yeah.
Tech has obviously been quite heavy in what you've done. Obviously, you know, it's not a silly way to go. But what interests you in businesses, and what makes you want to get involved?
It's funny, like I tend to invest at the very start, and I'm learning more about it now. You know, obviously, and I don't have the capital that I would have had. Well, yeah, you know, your income that you would have had while playing. So you had a lot more kind of disposable income, I suppose, and ways of kind of getting your war chest up to deploy it effectively. So I'm kind of, I suppose I'm learning more now about the landscape and kind of going a bit more deeper and granular than I would have previously while playing, because I just didn't have the bandwidth to do so. But while playing, they were all things that I was interested in, because I wanted to find an area or field that I could make a living, I could cut my teeth in post playing, I suppose. But the very, very first one I did was actually a medical device, and that's because I did medical engineering in college. So, you know, they all kind of thought the second one I did was like, was Bear Restaurant, because I like food, you know what I mean? But you learn loads off it. And then Kitman Labs, it's a sports data company. We were using it in Leinster. You know, all these different things kind of were making sense at the time to me. And then I suppose I got a little bit more easier with going into fields that I didn't know as much as, or understand as much as, you know, like the Pointys of this world, like Flender, like UrbanVolt, and you could argue the pubs, although I'll argue back saying I spent enough in them that I, over the years, that I should know something about them. But essentially kind of learning a lot off them. And to be honest, a big reason for it all was while playing, you know, I put money aside for, you know, I wanted a nice house and that had little to no debt on it, and I'm kind of working away on that. And then, you know, you couldn't really put your money on deposit. Like, you got to remember, I started playing 05, you know, so when core of my career, like 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, was in the middle of, you know, bar now, one of our biggest recessions. Yeah. So it was like, what's the point in putting on deposit? So it was a bit of a kind of, like you said, looking at the whole portfolio. Okay, you've your savings here for your house. You have, you know, okay, you've made some investments in property here. Okay, why don't we look at business investments as well as kind of commodities and equities and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of trying to manage the whole picture at the time.
So probably your biggest one that, you know, would jump out there most recent is the Pointy, you know, acquisition and the development of that product. You know, you must have been really, you know, it's a great product. So, you know, those type of stores are great to be involved in.
Yeah. Like, I mean, a lot of people ask me about what my investment strategy was, and I suppose you would probably relate to this in terms of your background, where a lot of it actually for me had to do with the people. I invested in the people and the team as opposed to the idea. So Pointy is a really good example of that, where I got introduced to Mark and Charlie, you know, the founders, kind of met them, kind of talked about what, like, their backgrounds. You know, Mark had already sold one company into Google, the first company outside of the US to be sold into them. You know, so he knew what he was about. He had the heritage, he had the kind of the actual skills. Same with Charlie, and they were good guys, you know, really good guys. And with startups, the founders are the DNA of the company going forward, you know, and they essentially established the culture and are the culture for the first while. And I know what the benefit is of having a really strong culture over the likelihood of longer term kind of success as opposed to really short-termism. And you know, they were a case in point in that. And ironically though, they were the first of all my companies to actually have an exit. And so they, you know, I was delighted for them. I have no doubt that Mark will probably seems like one of these guys that will have another idea in a couple of years, you know what I mean? But for now, him and his team, which I think is the thing he's most proud of, is he was able to bring every one of those employees across as part of the acquisition into Google, and our full-time employees is in Google now.
Yeah, it's a great story, and the product itself, you know, it's one of those clever great little things. You just go, you know,
yeah,
it's so simple.
And it was so simple, so effective. The amount of data they were ingesting as well made it even more powerful in the background. But his execution was unbelievable on it, and how they just scaled the product as they went along was probably the most impressive thing. You know, talking with Mark, but he knew his stuff, and he had a really good way of going about it, and hired some really, really good people along the way. And yeah, they're just, it was really good to see how they empowered SMEs as well. Because if you look at that whole landscape, and if you even look at it now, you know, in the modern COVID, like, you have all these different companies now going on. Okay, if I can't meet my customer, how do I compete online? How do I enable that? And that's what Pointy kind of saw. They didn't see COVID coming, but they saw this transition happening, I suppose, to the online world. And if you look at Google themselves, it's no surprise that they acquired it, because, you know, they're in a battleground with Amazon or Alibaba and that in Asia, in terms of like you know, how do you compete with these big Goliaths, you know? And it's, I think one of the good things we're seeing nowadays throughout this crisis is people kind of leaning on their community and their local shops as well. So, and that's what's really good to hear about something like Pointy, that it can help those kind of, you know, the local hardware store, the corner shop, drive business towards their store and help compete.
Yeah, no, it is a great story, and it's, you know, as you said, it's a helping business. It's not something that's trying to extract value too readily. It's good. Another business I'm interested in is the Kitman stuff. You know, I've was a little sports geek inside. Well, not inside. I wanted to get player tracks just running around pitches just to see your speed, you know, that kind of stuff. But, you know, great business, and it's really good uptake on that. How much involvement have you had in that, or has that been your
come back to my normal background for you?
How much involvement have you had in there? Has that been an advisory role as well?
Well, Kitman Labs is one of the few ones where I sit on the board and have done from the start, and I've really enjoyed my time on it. For the first while, when I finished playing, I actually kind of was consulting, for want of a better word, for about 6 months with them, which is really, really interesting, because their product is evolving so much, and you're getting so much feedback from teams that are using it, how you adapt that, and then you know the competitors as well in the space. And the Sports Office, for example, were one of those competitors who we acquired in January. You know, it's a really, really interesting space. And I think that sports data space, I mean, the question that used to drive me mad, or not, the thing that used to drive me mad about playing was like, oh, we're training this way because that's the way we always done it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there was no rhythm or rhyme behind the why, or what's the data saying. And it wasn't until Michael Cheika came along, actually, and he brought the GPS tracking that was being used in Aussie rules in 2007 up to Leinster. And we were the first Northern Hemisphere site to start using it. And we started initially, I think we were only using it in games, and then he started seeing the data from that. And then we started we're only using it in training, and then we started using it in games. And then we started, you saw the gap between what a game actually was and what, you know, training is, and they try and shorten that gap down to the instances and the metrics that actually matter. And it's come on, obviously, leaps and bounds since then. But the data you can extrapolate from that, when you combine it with medical data and stuff like that, is IDing traits of what good looks like, what brilliant looks like, what likelihood of injury looks like, and what are the metrics that feed into that matter. And that's what Kitman's doing, and is putting sense and data behind it. Obviously, it's very hard in the micro to pick up trends, but when you look at the macro, you can pick out trends, and that's the beauty of it. As it scales up, it gets better and better and better and better and better. And they're at a substantial size right now, and are growing even more aggressively with the, like I said, with the acquisition of the Sports Office in the UK, and growing and merging those two companies now together going forward, and looking at other opportunities. But it's really, really interesting to see the cool stuff they're doing with the data and AI software that they have in place.
It just makes sense if one of the biggest commodities of a team is the athletes themselves, if they're not.
Yeah, and then the really cool thing becomes like, okay, well, how do you're able to start quantifying athletes then, and quantifying players, and you know, all sorts of things can feed into that. It all depends on what you layer it with, really. You know what I mean? Is it from a commercial aspect? Is it from a winning aspect? You know, all sorts of different things can feed into it, and get quite interesting. And we're only looking at the sports field, because you could start pivoting this into the insurance world. You could go all sorts of different ways with it. You could go into a corporate wellness world with it. You know, all sorts of different avenues. General consumer front, you could go with. So, but you're right. There's a lot of power in the data, and I think it's a commodity that people didn't realize was you were able to make money out of. But until people like Google and Amazon and Facebook came along and showed what you can do with that.
Yeah, I've a Garmin. I when I was finished playing soccer, just a Saturday team, and it was if you got to wear long, if you had the long sleeve jerseys on, you could hide the watch underneath, and it was great because you could actually see how much you ran during the game.
Yeah.
You know, and when I run a good bit now, and it's, you know, beat your best. It the Garmin type thing, and it's like, yeah, it's an addiction after a while. You're probably like that when you were playing. You were
Well,
going, was I giving it 100%? And
there's a reason that someone like Fitbit got acquired by Google. You know what I mean? They're one of the longest in the business in terms of wearable space. And, you know, imagine a company like Google, what they can do with all that data. And they're doing, one of Alphabet's companies is doing a whole lot in that life sciences space. So it's no surprise to me that they did that deal. But you're right, like on the very human level, it's like, you know, you want to you want to know what you're at, how you're trucking on. I wear a Whoop, and previous to that I had an Aura ring, just out of habit from playing, because when I was playing, literally you'd come in the morning, you'd weigh yourself, you do these different range of motions, and you input it all into the app. You know what I mean? And then you have a chat with one of your trainers, and they're kind of talking to you about, you know, it was really like a traffic light system. You know, red, there's something massively wrong with this person. Orange, you got to go check with them. Green, they're good to go. You know what I mean? That's how you dealt with 50 players on scale every day to make sure that you're reducing an injury profile, which is on average about 33%. You know, you're making sure that you're managing them to be at their best to perform, which is in sports the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I was trying to organize actually a sports tech meetup before we were all put on hold. So that's one of the first ones.
Well, there's some really, really cool things out there. You know, you've got Kitman, obviously, and you got Oracle over in Sligo. They're doing some cool things. Offline, we were talking about Let's Get Checked. They're doing some really, really good. Like, people think Let's Get Checked and they go STD testing, but they have such a, that's obviously where they started, but they have such a wide array of things that from a performance aspect that you can check, you know, vitamin levels, hormone levels, mineral levels, all sorts of different kind of things that are all obviously health related, but also performance related. There's all sorts of different companies in the space. Dan Levy, I saw invested in one there not too recently, can't remember the name of it right now. But kind of more for the at-home, you know, your gym goer type thing, measuring your performance while actually in the gym. I'm sure I'm going to butcher that, and Dan will be on to me. But you know, in terms of Ireland as an innovation centre, we are
outputs.
There you go. Yeah, we're impressive. You know what I mean? We've got a well-educated workforce, that are coming with some really, really good ideas. It's a bit of a talking point right now, and you know, regarding Scale Ireland and the lobbying that they're doing against the government in terms of what they're going to do to make sure that we don't kill off all these ideas, you know, but that's not for this talk.
Yeah, no, talent is a whole different talk. Just in relation to, you know, I won't take much more of your time up, in relation to kind of yourself, you investor, you know, what's next for Jamie Heaslip? You have your leadership background with Captain in Ireland, your sports marries into business extremely well from knowing a lot of people that have done that. You know, where do you see your kind of, you've obviously had to look at things now and where it was in 6-12 months.
People come on to me and they're like, a lot of people, different former players, current players, guys finishing up, and kind of like, what did you have it figured out? And I'm like, I'm so far from having it figured out. It's not even a joke, you know. And I'm 2 years retired now, and I've done a lot. And you start figuring out, you learn a little bit more about what you like, what you don't like, all these different things that you do along the way. And one of the common themes is mentoring people, is working with people, and particularly kind of one-on-one, not necessarily big groups, but kind of trying to get the most out of people and trying to get them to get the most out of themselves. And some people call it life coaching, some people call it executive coaching, some people call it mentoring, whatever. But it's a space that I'm leaning more into and learning a lot more about, because it's definitely a passion of mine to help people get the most out of themselves. Because that's essentially what I did for 15 years as a player, and long before that. Because while everyone kind of looks at the end result of winning, you know what I mean, of and all these different things, it's like compound interest, man. You know, it's like they don't see it, you know, when you were like 15, running the race course in Naas with a 15 kilo weight in the bag. You know what I mean? Because you've been told you're not big enough. You know what I mean? And not getting into different academies along the way. They don't understand the bigger story, and you learn a lot about yourself throughout all that. So, and then obviously while playing, trying to have my kind of 360 perspective on things definitely helped me, and I think it can help a lot of people. So trying to formalize that is what I'm looking at now over the next, I don't know, whatever it is, 6, 9 months, 12 months while we're in this period right now. That's something I'm looking at, but also diving into the businesses and helping them out. Like take the pubs, for example, success for the pubs now is just breaking even over the next 2 years. And so trying to figure out, how do we do that? So all these different challenges is kind of what I'm leaning into on business that I am involved in, and also for my own growth as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's been great talking to you today, Jamie. Appreciate your time, and if anybody wants to get in contact with you, I'm guessing connect with you on LinkedIn and go from there.
LinkedIn is probably the best place to touch base with me, or I mean, if they really want to get me, they can come through you. But I'm pretty easy to reach, and I'm open to always talking to people.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jamie. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, Gav.